Trixie's Forest Retreat. By Crow's Crow. Chapter 94. Reprove. Checking herself in the mirror, Trixie smiled slowly as she confirmed her large hat covered up the aura of her horn perfectly. "Bye, Mom." Trixie called over her shoulder while she dashed out the door, excited for another day of school after her grueling weekend. She had not been this eager since her first day, and this time nothing was going to ruin it. On the corner of the street, her best friend and #1 fan, Flitter Bouquet, was already waiting for her. She looked uncomfortably skittish of the ponies passing her by, as though she wanted nothing more than to be invisible, but she was there as promised. A look of relief washed over her face when she caught sight of Trixie, and waved at her. "Hey, Trixie." She smiled, gaining the look of excitement she reserved just for her. Flitter's fiery eyes roamed for a moment before she raised a brow. Did you forget your books?" Trixie had been prepared to patiently wait for Flitter to notice the distinct lack, but she had clearly underestimated her attention to detail. Grinning, she struck a magnificent pose with her hoof pointed up. "Trixie is traveling light today." "Oh, that's great. I mean I like it, but, I don't know if the teacher will." Trailing off, Flitter's eyes widened once she caught sight of the books floating above them in the air. What? But how? You could barely move my notebook last time." It was true, when Trixie first stole the spell off Starlight and Sunny Days, she had been worse than a mere amateur at it. Of course, that was entirely to blame on those fools using such a terrible version of the spell. It had taken Trixie the better part of a day to figure out that half the things they did to make it work were useless. Reveling in the sheer awe on Flitter's face, Trixie lifted her hat to show her glowing horn. Isn't it obvious? It is because Trixie is great and powerful, right? To accentuate her point, she enveloped her aura around Flitter's book belt, pulling it up into the air as well. It was a bit tougher to hold all of it in the air, but Trixie managed. She'd practiced her flank off the past weekend, and it paid off spectacularly as Flitter actually cheered in broad daylight, drawing the eyes of every pony on the street to her. "That's amazing, Trixie. I can't believe you actually learned their spell just like that." Oh. Suddenly aware of all the ponies watching her, Flitter quickly wilted to a mumbling mess. "So sorry, too loud. Sorry." Trixie suppressed a sigh while she watched, but she had to admit Flitter had done much better than she expected. Fortunately, she knew exactly how to come to Flitter's rescue. Trixie quickly reared up on her back legs and spread her forelegs out in a grand gesture. Mere false play for the great and powerful Trixie. Behold. She closed her eyes and focused on setting of the Sparks spell to get all eyes where they belonged, on her. It was oddly quiet. Trixie heard none of the expected ohs and ahs. Opening her eyes, Trixie saw some ponies looking at her with confusion while others walked away. It quickly became clear that the sparks that should have been in the air were not there. What the hey? Pouring more magic into her Sparks spell, Trixie was absolutely sure she was setting off a fireworks show in the middle of the day. She could feel it. Why aren't they showing up? The growled and tried even harder. All around her, her audience was quickly losing interest in the two silly fillies and went about their usual business. Only Flitter was still staring at Trixie and certainly trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Nice pose? It's very commanding." Sweat ran down her face as Trixie tried even harder, still with no result. It was maddening. What's wrong? Why can't Trixie do this? Flitter narrowed her eyes as she peered just slightly above Trixie. "Trixie? Is your hat supposed to be sparking a little? I can't see it too well." Trixie's hat. In one fluid motion, Trixie struck her forehead with her hoof for her idiocy, then swept it up along to pull her hat back, revealing her horn just as it emitted a last spark. At least this one made it to the air uninhibited, but it was nowhere near the show she had actually intended to do. Right. Problem solved. Ahem, round 2. She concentrated on the spell again, but all she heard were a number of dull thuds all around her. The books were laying in the street, defying her obvious talent. Oh come on. A few quick attempts to pick the books back up only resulted in an awkward flicker around them before it died off again. No matter how many times she tried, she couldn't do it. Trixie's heart pounded in her chest with fright. She could barely see the defiant books anymore as the world became blurry with tears. "Faux flitter," she choked out, falling to her knees. Trixie's magic is broken. It wasn't fair. She'd finally figured out how to use real magic and now she'd lost it. She'd be a laughingstock. The school would expel her. Her mom would have to move to some Earth-Ponya town to fit in. She'd never see Flitter again. Eyes wide as though she was witnessing something unreal, Flitter just stared at the trembling Trixie. "Be broken?" She looked at Trixie, then down at the flickering books. "Oh." Wrapping her hooves around Trixie, she hugged her tightly. "It's normal, Trixie. I swear." Trixie was already halfway through imagining how she might have to pretend her horn was just a really nasty bump on the head. Flitter's warmth brought her back to the present though, calming her down a little. "Nah, normal. But it's broken. I'm sorry. I forgot you don't know much about magic." Flitter shook her head with a pained look on her face. "You're just tired, okay? It happens if you use magic too much." Trixie's just tired? But Trixie's been doing it all weekend. Despite her minor protest, Trixie felt a little better already. If this wasn't freaking Flitter out, that had to mean she really was already familiar with it. Trixie knew that, she muttered. "All weekend? My mom can't even use magic that much." She smiled while helping Trixie back on her hooves. "Geez, you can't even exhaust yourself without doing something amazing. It's not fair for the rest of us, you know." Shooting Flitter a rapidly improving smile, Trixie quickly wiped her tears off on her fetlocks. "Gah. My ego. Trixie's only weakness, how did you know?" She recoiled theatrically. Puffing her chest in pride, Trixie gave her spell another try. She just barely managed to stack the books before it ran out. "Trixie supposes that we'll have to pay it for the morning show." Watching Trixie stack the books, Flitter grabbed her book belt. "I'm a little jealous now. It took me an hour before I could make a spark after I ran out the first time, you know." Flitter chimed in. "My mom made me do it so I would know what it felt like. I guess she was right to tell me first, or I guess I'd have been scared too." Trixie was not scared. She was just surprised, that was all. She trailed off and looked away. "Still, thanks, Flitter." The clear, unmistakable chiming of the school bell broke up the conversation. Both fillies looked towards the source of the sound, then to locked eyes before shouting in unison, "We're late." Detention. Trixie couldn't believe it. She'd never gotten detention before. Okay, well there was that one time, but smoke bombs can be volatile, it could have happened to any pony. Either way, she was stuck after school, at school, which considering how excited she had been to get to school was surprisingly awful. With a grumble, she swept a small pile of dirt and trash through the hallway. The broom they'd given her to use had to be old enough to have swept up what was left of Nightmare Moon after the battle 1,000 years ago. A real piece of history. Maybe it had magic powers of its own after being around that long? Holding it out in front of her, Trixie stared at the old rickety broom for a moment. Yeah, Trixie doesn't think so. Talking to yourself already, Trickery? You look ridiculous. She'd recognize that grating voice anywhere. Starlight, if Trixie wanted to hear her opinion she'd have dragged her hoof down a chalkboard. Don't be like that. Starlight even brought you a present. Look, Starlight said in a mocking tone as she mimicked Trixie's speech. With an impish grin, she levitated a dustbin into view. You looked so bored that Starlight figured you must not have enough to do, so here you go. Before Trixie could stop her, Starlight scattered the contents all over the freshly swept floor. "Hey! Trixie just cleaned that," she yelled, glaring at the aggravating pony. It was then that Trixie took note of a surprising detail. Starlight was not with Moonrock nor Sunny Days. Catching sight of that, Trixie reined in her temper so it just barely shimmered through in her voice. "What happened to your friends?" "None of your business. That's what." Starlight inspected the empty bin, ensuring she'd gotten everything out. Trixie couldn't be sure where they were, but if they'd been anywhere nearby, Starlight wouldn't have been so defensive about it, which had to mean she's alone. Trixie grinned. "Oh, Trixie understands." They finally got tired of hanging out with a blank flank. With a clatter, the dustbin rolled across the floor. Starlight glared at Trixie, letting her know she had a sore spot. "They don't care, they're my friends. So what if I haven't found my talent yet? At least I know I won't get mine doing something lame like you. Table dancing? Huh. Are they?" Sunny Days would hang around with any random pony that asked her. She doesn't know any better. "And, Trixie saw Moonrock did you last time to go to class." "To class? Need Trixie say more?" As expected, her taunts made Starlight bare her teeth, but that was not all. It was more subtle, but Trixie could see something flicker in Starlight's eyes that Trixie could not quite identify. Somehow, it reminded her of how Flitter had looked that morning, standing alone on the street before Trixie arrived. Hey, Moonrock thinks class is important, okay. And she's right. I shouldn't have wasted my time on a no-pony like you." Trixie stepped in closer to Starlight, causing her to step back. "No, she knows you aren't important. You know why, right? Only loser ponies get their cutty marks last, because they get the ones that no pony else wanted." "Shut up!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. "That is not how it works." Is it?" Taking panicky glances around, Starlight took another step back, fighting back tears. "So shut up." Immediately, Trixie stepped forward again. "It's no surprise, is it? After all, even your name shows how ordinary you are, Starlight. Did you know there are more stars than ponies?" Trixie watched Starlight slowly crumble with each cutting word, and it felt magnificent. Her mind reeled for something else she could throw at the grown pony. Anything to push her a little further and get another reaction. Glancing down the broom still in her hooves, Trixie put on a look of mock sympathy as she held it out towards Starlight. "Here. Maybe you can get a cutty mark in handling trash. Seems fitting." "Shut up. Shut up or I'll..." "Or you'll what?" Trixie boomed as she reared up on her hind legs, startling Starlight as one hoof just barely missed her on the ascent. Glaring down at the shrinking pony before her, Trixie dropped back on all fours. Victorious, she turned away from Starlight, trotting back to her chore as she tried to ignore the rush in her veins. The great and powerful Trixie is not scared of you, blank flank. As a final jab, she simply returned to work, taking care of the other trash. Shaking, Starlight trotted backwards till she hit a wall. She simply stood there for a little while as Trixie ignored her. Wiping her eyes and cheeks dry, Starlight took the hint and made herself scarce. Just as she was about to turn the corner, Starlight muttered, "I guess you're not." Her tone darkened. "But I know some pony who is." What was that supposed to mean? Trixie glanced in Starlight's direction, but she was already gone. With Starlight out of sight, Trixie hoof pumped. "Huh. Trixie won. That was amazing." The grin on her face felt almost painfully wide as she swept the trash onto a pile. It didn't seem like such a bad chore now that it doubled as an insult. Annoyingly, her limbs had started shaking after she had calmed down a little. The broom felt heavier than it had been before, which did not help her in getting her work done any quicker. Still, she couldn't be more pleased with herself. Just wait till Flitter hears about this. Trixie dropped the broom. Flitter. Dashing through the hall, Trixie tried to recall where the professor had sent Flitter to. If only she had actually paid attention, but all she remembered was that he'd split them up. As she passed the staircase, Trixie skidded to a halt. If her chore was to clean the ground floor, then didn't that mean he had put Flitter on the second floor? She had never actually been on the second floor, as generally students were not supposed to go there. It was rumored that it was haunted, though teachers climbed the stairs frequently enough that Trixie doubted that. Originally Trixie had proposed spending recess there, but Flitter was terrified of the ghosts getting them. Of course the professor would see to it that Flitter would spend detention in the worst possible place. Trixie nearly tripped over the last step as she immediately caught sight of Starlight at the end of the hall, right next to Flitter. She must have made a lot of noise coming up, as Starlight turned her head away from Flitter, and gave a glare directly at Trixie. Trixie was too far away to do anything but watch, or so Starlight must have thought. "Get away from her!" Trixie screamed, setting her horn ablaze and lifting an extremely shocked and struggling Starlight clear of the ground, slamming her into the ceiling. Trixie? Flitter looked almost as shocked as Starlight. Judging by how calm Flitter looked, Trixie decided whatever Starlight had planned to do, she intended to wait till Trixie could see her do it. Which meant she'd made it in time. "It's okay, Flitter. Trixie's got this." With that, she pulled Starlight towards her, keeping her struggling in midair. Trixie couldn't be sure how much magic she had restored after just one afternoon of not using any, but right now she felt as if she could launch Starlight to the moon and not even break a sweat. "Did you think Trixie would let you?" Trembling, Starlight ceased her meaningless struggle, staring wide-eyed at Trixie. Blood ran down her muzzle after the impact, but she was much more concerned with Trixie. How? You can't do this. Put me down, please." "Oh, Trixie will put you down, all right." She glanced towards the window, then back to Starlight, who followed her gaze, paling instantly. "No." Starlight shrieked, tears in her eyes. "Please." Flitter stood nailed to the ground while she watched the entire thing take place. Trixie bared her teeth at Starlight, fire coursed through her veins. How dared Starlight act like she was the victim, just seconds after seeking out Flitter to hurt her? "Do you?" Miss Lulamoon, a dull voice drawled right behind Trixie, but it was loud enough to startle her. Every pony froze. Apparently none of them had heard him coming, but as Trixie turned around she saw Professor Silence. He was looking down at her, then glanced briefly up at the floating Starlight with what could almost pass as only a mild disinterest. Quickly, Trixie dispelled her magic, dropping Starlight down on the floor with a thud and yelp. He stared at the three of them quietly for a time, not one of them dared to move. He'd never spoken to or interfered with the students before. After a moment, his eyes settled on Trixie. "Step into my office." With that, he turned around and trotted into a nearby room. All the heat was gone from the hallway. He'd barely spoken, but the very fact that he had said anything at all, it terrified Trixie. What had she just been about to do? Throw Starlight out of a window? How much trouble did that get a pony into? Sensing that delaying was likely to get her into even more trouble, Trixie dragged her hooves over the threshold. She briefly looked at Flitter and Starlight. It might be her last chance to see either of them. A green glow shut the door, cutting them out of Trixie's sight. Turning around, Trixie found herself in a large office with files and various books ordered and neatly arranged perfectly straight. By the wall stood a large desk, a stack of papers on one side that Trixie recognized as last week's tests. Taking a seat at his desk, Silence motioned to a small stool. "Sit." Trixie gulped. Chapter 95. Ruminate. Canterlot. It was every bit as beautiful as Trixie had always been told it would be. The very city itself sparkled in the sunlight, and everywhere Trixie looked she saw adoring faces soon to be admiring her obvious talent. Above, the sun shone down on her ever brighter. Its light reflected of every surface, and in the eyes of each pony. What began as pleasant warm weather got worse every passing second, until not even her hat could shield Trixie from the light and heat. Trotting blindly, Trixie collided against something painfully hot and tripped backwards onto her haunches. Through squinted eyes, she could barely make out a set of white furred knees that came up to her horn. "There is a very special place in Tartarus for ponies like you, Trixie." Celestia smiled without warmth down at her. The sun's hatred boiled in her eyes, scorching everything in her sight, but Trixie was unable to look away from her. "And if you come back, I'll send you there myself." Her entire being gripped with fear, Trixie fell to her knees before the fiery sun goddess. No. Please forgive Trixie." She snivelled while some pony grabbed her mane and painfully dragged her away as she pleaded for mercy. "Please." Trixie woke with a whimper while her heart beat in her throat. Opening her eyes, Trixie found herself looking directly at the headboard. Something was forcing her to crane her neck by pulling on her mane, causing her quite a bit of discomfort. A quick glance revealed Fluttershy was the culprit, once again. Quickly, Trixie's eyes scanned what little of the room she could see before breathing a sigh of relief. Relax, Trixie. It's over now. It was just a stupid dream." Even if the dream was over, she could still faintly feel the burning sun on her face, or maybe that was the soup. From the corner of her eye, Trixie stared at the window. Even though the cloth blocked out the morning sun, she knew it was there, trying to get in. Wasn't Lena supposed to be guarding Trixie's dreams? Was this her way of warning her? Is it getting harder to breathe in here? Trixie felt herself starting to hyperventilate and tried to sit up, but was stopped by a tug on her mane, reminding her that Fluttershy was there. Though it was not exactly painful, it was still a pretty awkward position to be stuck in. "Fluttershy," she hissed in between ragged breaths, receiving another tug in response. "Fluttershy, let go." "Fee." Fluttershy muttered drowsily around Trixie's mane while she peeked out of one eye. Upon catching sight of Trixie, she shut up wide awake, guilty tears forming in her eyes. "Fee. Blah. Trixie. I'm so sorry. Oh my goodness. I didn't mean to hurt you. Oh, please stop crying." Free of Fluttershy's grip, Trixie forced herself to take proper breaths while listening as Fluttershy rattled off apologies for biting her mane again. She considered stopping her, but maybe a little bit of panic would make her less likely to repeat her offense in the future. That last one stumped her though. "Excuse you?" The great and powerful Trixie does not cry. Oh, but, Fluttershy petered out and just stroked a hoof along her own cheek while she gave Trixie a look. Raising an eyebrow, Trixie mimicked the gesture. Her cheeks were wet. Oh, great. Just what Trixie needed. Look, that wasn't you Fluttershy, it was. Trixie paused. There was no way she could admit to a near dream reducing her to tears. She was supposed to be a grown mare, and greatest magician in Equestria. Trixie had something in her eye, okay. Fluttershy nodded slowly. "Oh, okay. I believe you. If you need her, Trixie will be fixing her mane, again." With hurried steps, Trixie trotted out of the room and closed the door behind her. Once she was out of earshot, she dragged a hoof down her face with a groan. Great, now Fluttershy thinks Trixie is a wuss. Despite the rough start to the morning, Trixie quickly found herself in a great mood. Dropping her brush in the sink, she took in one last moment to savor the blueberry scent that hung in the bathroom. In the mirror, the pinnacle of perfection smiled back at her before she took her leave. Right outside, Trixie encountered Fluttershy, apparently waiting her turn. "Oh. Trixie, didn't realize you were out here. Why didn't you say anything?" Trixie would have hurry. "Actually, on the other hoof, you cannot rush perfection." She smiled proudly while she ran a hoof through her mane as she stepped out of the way. "All yours." "Oh, no. I. Fluttershy trailed off while she stared wide-eyed at Trixie with a look that was some curious mix of awe and dawning horror. As soon as her path was clear, she rushed into the bathroom and closed the door. It was nearly impossible to hear Fluttershy's voice through the thick wooden door. Yes, thank you. That was odd. Trixie mused while she trotted her way into the kitchen. As though of their own accord, plates, cups and coasters flew off the shelves and neatly arranged themselves upon the table under Trixie's watchful, and more than a little gleeful, eyes. This is so easy now. Oh, maybe we'll have breakfast before the animals today. Though it was usually Fluttershy's chore, Trixie had discord to settle with a stack of hay and some loaves of bread, both of whom she was currently giving her smuttiest grin as she put them down on the table. Tremble before the might of Trixie. You will never humiliate her again. Within seconds the cowardly ingredients obeyed her will and arranged themselves into two perfectly aligned hay riches. Beaming with pride, Trixie set out on a mission to exert her regained superiority over every other task she could remember. Closets pulled open, feed bags swam through the air, bowls arranged themselves in all the right locations, and Trixie could not stop smiling while she stood reared up on her hind legs, directing all the actions with her hooves like the world's greatest conductor. Just a few days ago, attempting to perform all these tasks by herself took her the entire day, yet now she had completed their entire routine by the time Fluttershy came trotting outside with a confused look on her face. Trixie? Do you know why? Oh. My. Her eyes veered up to the sky as the Trixie hung up the last balls of bird feed. Trixie rounded on Fluttershy with delight. Why, yes. Trixie knows exactly why she is amazing. Everything is done. We have the whole day to ourselves. Isn't that great? Fluttershy's appearance gave Trixie pause. The mare always looked naturally picturesque, but never quite like this. Huh? Did she do something with her mane today? Fluttershy's eyes darted around the meadow, settling on each animal enjoying its morning meal briefly, before finally coming to rest on Trixie again. Fluttershy fidgeted with her hooves, a nervous habit of hers Trixie knew all too well by now. Yes. Great. I can't believe you did all this, Trixie. She did not sound as ecstatic as Trixie had hoped, but she did look impressed. Smiling, Trixie watched as Fluttershy wandered around the field as she inspected the various animals, offering assistance, but naturally Trixie had done everything perfectly. Afterwards, it was finally time for their own breakfast. As was often the case, their morning meal was peaceful, but this time Trixie got to entertain herself by taking care of the mundane tasks like handling the tea while comfortably seated. When are we going to see the wolf cubs? Next week when Dashie is done working? Trixie's never seen them little. Since we have the day off, maybe we could sneak a peek. Oh, wait, come to think of it. Didn't you say we were going to do something special today? You made Rainbow Dash move our date and everything. Once Trixie remembered, she could barely contain her excitement while she stared at Fluttershy expectantly. Whatever it was, it had to be amazing if Fluttershy would demand her schedule be kept. Flustered, Fluttershy shot to attention and stuttered. Oh, you that is. Maybe. Finally, she ended up just making that adorable little squeaking sound before she shut down entirely. By now she had lost all capability to even look Trixie in the eye, and retreated behind her mane, blushing. Though Trixie liked to think that she was used to most of Fluttershy's quirks by now, this was a new one. Or if not new, at least one that she had thought they'd grown past by now. All she did was ask what Fluttershy had planned, didn't she? That shouldn't have been too hard to talk about. Whatever was going on, Trixie knew what an under pressure, nervous Fluttershy looked like. If Trixie didn't try to relieve her somehow, she'd clamp up for Luna knows how long. Showing her best smile, Trixie waved her hoof dismissively. No rush, Trixie can wait, okay. Do you like your hair, witch? All Trixie got out of Fluttershy was a careful nod before she bit into a meal, clearly not ready to talk yet. "That's good. Trixie knew you would," Trixie said before following Fluttershy's example. As she ate, she observed her quiet companion. Even now, the poor thing was all tensed up, and stared down at nothing while she ate. Lowering her voice, Trixie asked, "More tea?" Her offer went ignored, or rather unheard, as Trixie expected. What is she thinking about? The minutes crept by slowly while Trixie waited, and attempted to appear as though she was not at all getting impatient. Though by now, Trixie suspected Fluttershy was not about to say what was on her mind anytime soon. That has to mean it's something unusual then. She wouldn't be this timid if she wanted to go look at animals or something, right? The more Trixie thought about it, the more the word unusual seemed to apply to Fluttershy lately. It was not merely yesterday evening, but the past few days. Fluttershy seemed to be both more forward, and paradoxically at the same time more timid than usual. She'd asked to be present when Trixie and Dash discussed their date, and was interested in knowing what kissing was like, but when Trixie actually talked about the date afterward, Fluttershy was not as interested. That's right, isn't it? She started being weird ever since the sleepover. Fluttershy said she was cold, but Dash said Pegasus don't get cold. Was she lying? Don't be silly. Trixie saw her, she didn't look good. Trixie felt a gnawing sense of uncertainty. Yes, she had seen Fluttershy's face was red and puffy, but she was perfectly healthy in the evening. How many illnesses made a pony look like that, then cleared up in a day? It didn't add up. Something must have happened to make Fluttershy act this way around her. Racking her brain, Trixie went over what they'd done during the sleepover. If she was honest, she had not really put any thought into the night since each time she tried the very first, very distracting, memory was of Rainbow Dash surprising her with a kiss, and finally agreeing to give her a chance. Trixie could feel her cheeks burning while her heart raced just from recalling the night, but she did her best to push past it and think of what else had happened. Well. There was Trixie's stupid kissing bet. Dash didn't like that. Fluttershy yelled at her tricking Trixie, and then, Trixie talked with Fluttershy about how much they meant to her. Fluttershy was confused, and wanted Trixie to help her understand, but she said she was okay with Trixie off. Her eyes slowly widened to the size of dinner plates as the memory unfolded before her. Fluttershy shifted uncomfortably, as though she knew something she shouldn't. I was just thinking. I don't think you should leave just because of unrequited love. You said you really like to be around, us. So why throw that away? Even if the feeling isn't mutual, I'm sure Rainbow Dash would be okay with knowing you like her, a little more. I know I am. Far too late, Trixie covered her mouth with her hooves, as if she expected to retroactively stop herself from speaking. That was absolutely not how she had wanted Fluttershy to find out, if ever at all. Trixie sat frozen while she stared at Fluttershy, silently cursing herself while she tried to go over what else she had said. Seeing Trixie starting to panic, Fluttershy gave a reassuring smile, and reached one wing out to wrap around her. Trixie. It's okay. I'm not upset, honest. Nothing's different, but I don't really understand how you feel that way about two ponies. Can you help me? If that's all right with you? If her heart rate had been through the roof before, now it was reaching for clouds in the fright-filled gambit to escape. She stared shocked at Fluttershy as she absent-mindedly chewed on her bread. That's it. That is what's happened. Resisting the nearly overwhelming urge to smack her face into the hard wooden table for her massive oversight, Trixie rapidly ran through her folly in her head. She'd accidentally confessed to Fluttershy, in a moment where they both thought Dash was not interested in her, then the very next moment Dash had returned and claimed Trixie. At the time, Trixie thought Fluttershy's accepting reaction was just simply Fluttershy being Fluttershy, But what if it wasn't? Hadn't Fluttershy been a little too okay with finding out Trixie liked her that way? Her only question at the time was how Trixie could like two ponies, but she never questioned that Trixie liked her. What if Trixie'd foolishly gotten Fluttershy's hopes up, and then immediately ditched her for Dash? Trixie swallowed uncomfortably, feeling as though her throat was closed off. Oh, and then Trixie went and tried to talk to her about how much fun Trixie had with Dash, completely ignoring her feelings. She bit her lip while she watched Fluttershy eat quietly. Trixie is the worst. When she looked at it like that, everything made sense to her. The unusually cool reaction to the talk about the date, the stolen glances, the times she subconsciously drew nearer. At the same time it explained why Fluttershy had been trying to be more distant, breaking away each time she noticed she'd gotten closer, and acting more uncomfortable. Of course Fluttershy would feel terrible about her feelings if she thought she was disrupting a relationship. Although Trixie and Dash had been getting their moments interrupted with uncanny frequency by Fluttershy, maybe she wasn't all that averse to disrupting them. The date. She never had anything planned, she was trying to make us move it to next week. Who knew she was that cunning? In a strange way, Trixie felt more respect for Fluttershy, despite her attempts at sabotage. Trixie figured she would probably be more upset, if not for the fact that most of Fluttershy's attempts at sabotage had backfired, and the few that did anything only resulted in a delayed kiss or two. So, that was one issue taken care of. She now knew what the problem was, but that still left the actual problem. It would have been much easier if it had been something relatively minor, like say the return of the Ursa. Trixie had never considered how to deal with a hurt and jealous Fluttershy, and she'd gladly take the Ursa instead at this point. Finally turning her attention back to the meal, Trixie swallowed her last bite, then closed her eyes and took a couple of deep breaths. Once she was sure she was not in imminent danger of suffering a stroke, she looked across the table. Fluttershy was still slowly nibbling away at her food, but noticed Trixie this time as she looked back at her apologetically. Trixie opened her mouth to speak, but wordlessly closed it again when she noticed something that had escaped her when Fluttershy had been avoiding her gaze. Since when does Fluttershy wear makeup? She blinked slowly while she looked at the subtle touches of mascara and eyeshadow. The makeup wasn't heavy, instead it merely highlighted her natural beauty. Had Trixie not spent the last weeks in close quarters with her, she would never have even noticed it was there. Trixie knew that the cabinet behind the bathroom mirror contained some beauty products, but they looked like they'd never been touched, leading her to think they'd most likely been gifts. Realizing she'd been staring, Trixie shook her head. She cleared her throat. Fluttershy? Trixie has a question. Oh, yes. Fluttershy put down her half-eaten haywitch. Though Trixie did not really have much of a plan for what she was going to do about this. More than that, she could still be wrong. She'd just have to start by getting some confirmation from Fluttershy, then go from there. Trixie has been thinking. You didn't actually have anything planned for today, did you? Fluttershy ate and stared at Trixie like she'd just been caught with her hoof in the cookie jar. No, I thought we could go see the ducklings. Trixie raised up a skeptical eyebrow, though she couldn't help but smile. Ducklings? Trixie doubts that. Trixie is sure it must have crossed your mind during all that time you took trying to think up an excuse, that you had to invent something grave enough to warrant your behavior. She took a sip of her tea, letting the words linger briefly. That wasn't it. Fluttershy looked to be burning up while she tried to retreat behind her mane again, stammering quiet noises that Trixie could only assume were apologies of some sort. Trixie's had some time to think about this, she said while getting up, trotting around to the other side of the table as she spoke, and she believes she understands now. You were a little jealous, weren't you? Fluttershy visibly shrank under the accusation and hid her face in her hooves. Right on the mark. Trixie paused beside Fluttershy. Trixie didn't want to believe it, But you've been doing this stuff on purpose, haven't you? Were you that mad you were ignored? Fluttershy wouldn't speak, but she folded her ears flat against her mane, which told Trixie all she had to know. Though she could see Fluttershy shaking, and shifted to a softer, understanding tone while she took a seat next to her. Fluttershy, Trixie's not mad, okay? See, could you? Help Trixie understand? Trixie doesn't think you really meant to act this way, or you'd have come up with an actual plan, right? She slid one hoof gently around Fluttershy's shoulders, pausing only briefly when Fluttershy flinched at the first touch before she settled down. Without coming out hiding, Fluttershy whimpered. No. I didn't know what to do. I was scared I'd be all alone. And angry. Her sobs drowned out her voice as she shook in Trixie's grasp, hiccuping. I'm so sorry. I tried to be happy for you, really, but it hurt so much. Trixie's chest ached as though she'd fallen 3 stories down onto a hedgehog. She'd unwittingly caused Fluttershy so much pain and anxiety. Hey, see, come here. Pulling Fluttershy into a hug, Trixie lent her a shoulder while she stroked along her back. Trixie understands. This is new for you, right? You just acted on impulse. Fluttershy sniffled and gingerly pulled away till she could look at Trixie. Yeah, you don't hate me. But I. Of course not. Trixie interjected impatiently. Trixie loves you, even if you did something crazy. Well, it makes Trixie a little happy to know you care that much, if that makes any sense. She blushed furiously. In all honesty, she probably should have been angrier with Fluttershy, but when she looked at it like a sign of affection, she simply couldn't. Sometimes love just makes you do crazy impulsive things, right? Wincing slightly, Fluttershy nodded as she looked away for a moment. Yes, stupid impulsive things you hate yourself for. Trixie chuckled softly while she gently lifted Fluttershy's muzzle till she looked at her again. Trixie is intimately familiar with those, you know. She'd never hate you for them, and they aren't always bad. Looking into Trixie's eyes, Fluttershy tilted her head slightly with a puzzled look on her face. Trixie. What do you mean? Piff. Her eyes shot open wide as Trixie kissed her without warning, then pulled away, leaving Fluttershy to stare at her in shock. But? She stammered, failing utterly to get out more than one word. Licking her own lips, Trixie savored a taste as mild as the soft pony herself, and smiled at the sight of Fluttershy so completely flustered. Though Trixie couldn't hide her own scarlet blush, despite her attempt to act in control. You have no idea how long Trixie's been fighting that particular impulse. The continued look of shock on Fluttershy's face gave Trixie a nervous clawing feeling in her gut. Trixie's saying, do you, want to try? Fluttershy shook all over while she visibly tried to piece her mind back together. But I am. Fluttershy went quiet again, her brow furrowed. What about Rainbow Dash? Fluttershy finally managed to force out what few words Trixie imagined laid heaviest on her mind. Those words had, in fact, laid heavily on Trixie's own thoughts earlier as well. Letting out a breath she'd not even realized she'd been holding, Trixie felt a tremendous sense of relief wash over her. If she had been wrong on this one. The thought was too frightening to even consider. She's told Trixie before that she was okay with Trixie doing this. If you're not comfortable, we can wait till Dash gets back, and then talk about it. Would you like that? Fluttershy's eyes looked as though they were about to pop right out after that, but she quickly shook her head. No. Chapter 96. Regurgitate. At least. Trixie is pretty sure Dash is okay with this. Trixie had to admit she had not asked Dash since they started actually dating, though Dash had given her plenty of hints during the slumber party. She could feel her cheeks burning while she recalled the intimate dare that had Fluttershy licking the jelly off of her chest while Rainbow Dash watched. Trixie had been so scared that Dash was testing her, that she had offered to make Dash do the cleaning instead, but Fluttershy surprisingly accepted to do it before Dash could react. Despite Trixie's fear, once it started she had quickly lost her mind to the wonderful feeling of Fluttershy's tongue. It was only when it came to an abrupt and disappointing end, when the haze had disappeared over her mind, and she could think clearly, that terror enveloped her. Once she had realized she had ended up enjoying the very intimate moment far too much, in front of Dash no less, she panicked. But Dash was completely fine with it. She had even straight up told Trixie it had been her plan to get the two of them to do that all along when Trixie tried to apologize. Or plead for mercy, really. In her mind, Trixie ran over what exactly had transpired. Rainbow Dash approached Trixie. "Look, hey, I wasn't going to tell you but I wanted you to do that. I thought you and Fluttershy should get more comfy, you know. So, it's okay? You are okay with Trixie doing that? Are you really sure?" Trixie asked hesitantly, though she perked up her ears again. She felt better by the second as the words sunk in. "Of course I'm okay with it." Rainbow Dash smiled, and reached out a hoof to pet her reassuringly. Trixie smiled dreamily. She could swear she felt Dash's hoof run through her mane for a moment, reassuring her she wasn't doing anything wrong. A quick glance behind her revealed they were still alone however. Trixie felt her heart sink a little, but she told herself she'd see Dash again soon. The gentle tingling on her mane teasingly faded away. It felt like a sign to Trixie that she should stop worrying about this. Dash had said this was perfectly fine, and that had barely been a day ago. Granted, a few things had changed since then, but Trixie didn't deem it necessary to bog Fluttershy down with such minor details. She looked conflicted enough as it was. Though Trixie had offered to immediately get Dash involved in the talk, she had realized it was exceedingly unlikely that Fluttershy would want to do that at all. The only thing that could be called a bit surprising was how vehemently she rejected the idea. After that however, Fluttershy kept this indecisive look on her face that was bothering Trixie. But really, what is Trixie expecting? That Fluttershy will just proclaim she wants half of Trixie's attention from now on? Trixie frowned at the thought. That didn't sound like Fluttershy at all. Maybe she was going about this all wrong? Fluttershy was rarely proactive, so perhaps what she needed was for Trixie to be more proactive herself. Thinking about it, whenever Trixie had tried to trick Rainbow Dash into doing something, she'd gotten spurned. But when Trixie was honest about what she wanted, Dash usually rewarded her. Fluttershy had finally been honest about her feelings, so Trixie reasoned the right response was that she had to get some kind of reward too. Trixie can do that. Smirking lightly, Trixie led by restoring the neglected hug they shared to its proper tightness, eliciting a squeak from the gentle pony in her grasp. Tellingly, Fluttershy made no effort to escape Trixie's hold, spurring her on. Excitement coursing through her veins, Trixie nuzzled Fluttershy's neck, and exhaled a warm breath through her soft, honey-scented fur, receiving a slight shiver from Fluttershy in return. Despite how well things were going, Trixie was as nervous as she could be. This was not at all helped by the realization that she actually had no idea what to do now, as she was clueless on what kinds of things Fluttershy liked or disliked, physically at least. Well, what she lacked in knowledge, she would just have to make up for in enthusiasm. Trixie stretched one hoof out to touch the floor behind Fluttershy while leaning into her, guiding the Pegasus gently down to the ground until she was on top of her. Her face felt like it was on fire at this point, and by the looks of it so was Fluttershy's, who held her eyes closed tightly. Trixie leaned on the outstretched leg, allowing herself to admire the adorable mare below her for a lingering moment. Some part of her expected to wake up any second now while she ran a slow trail of kisses along Fluttershy's throat and muzzle, until she caught her lips again. Blissfully, Trixie found Fluttershy wasn't as frozen solid this time, though she was predictably timid and stirred below her. Just as Trixie attempted to coax Fluttershy to try and deepen the kiss, Fluttershy struggled below her, and turned away. Smiling with a display of bashfulness, Trixie shifted some of her weight onto Fluttershy, and reached for her muzzle to guide her back, whispering, "It's okay, Fluttershy. Trixie promises you'll like it. Trixie, please." So stop. Perking up her ears, Trixie froze in place, half a feather away from Fluttershy's lips. So stop. She could feel the color drain out of her face as she pushed herself away. Pinned to the ground by Trixie, Fluttershy stared up at Trixie anxiously. Her pupils were like pinpricks, before she broke eye contact, looking off to the side. Trixie felt as though she'd been struck in the stomach, and scrambled onto her hooves, taking a few quick steps away from Fluttershy. "Did Trixie hurt you?" she asked, almost hopeful that she had, but she knew that wasn't the problem. Trixie's sorry. So she just thought that. What had she been thinking? That Fluttershy needed to be pushed past her boundaries? That she'd be into it once she got a taste of how great Trixie was? Each answer that passed her mind just made her feel more disgusted with herself. It was getting hard to breathe while Trixie watched Fluttershy roll over onto her stomach, refolding her wings in the process. Once Fluttershy looked at Trixie, Trixie quickly looked away, avoiding her gaze. In doing so, Trixie caught sight of the door, and the next thing she knew, she made a dash for it. Trixie's lungs felt like they were on fire as she leaned heavily against the rough bark of an old oak. She slumped down at its roots while she gasped for breath. She had not even made it all that far off the meadow, which was another thing she could blame her recent inactivity for. Just a little further ahead, Trixie spotted another oak tree, and immediately felt as though she should have kept moving just a little longer to rest at it instead. The tree looked withered and dead, with open cracks and holes in the bark. It felt much more appropriate for her situation. Folding her forelegs in front of her, Trixie rested her head on them. It was pathetic. Even when she was running away she didn't do that good of a job. She wasn't even sure why she had fled, perhaps just to spare Fluttershy from having to flee her home a second time. It was a nice thought to entertain that she was just acting in Fluttershy's best interest, but really, Trixie knew she was just scared to face her right now. Looking back on it, Trixie could scarcely believe how she dismissed it when Fluttershy set her boundaries so clearly. It had just felt so natural to go a step further. She did it all the time with Rainbow Dash. But Fluttershy isn't Rainbow Dash. Trixie knew Dash is fast at everything. Fluttershy's the opposite. Trixie knew that too. She blew a lock of hair out of her face, but it proved futile as it just swung right back into her vision. Trixie should have gone slower. No, Trixie should have stopped immediately. Could that be why Dash was so angry with Trixie the first time she thought Trixie tried to seduce Fluttershy? She knew Trixie would trample over Fluttershy's limits. If she had been allowed now, that had to mean Dash trusted her to do right by Fluttershy. Trixie sighed dejectedly and shook her head. She wanted to rush right back home and talk to Fluttershy, but perhaps what she ought to do right now was just cool off in the breeze until she could put that plan into action with a clear head. She was sure Fluttershy didn't want to see her for a while anyway. A soft rustling beside her made Trixie perk up her ears. Is this seat taken?" a soft voice asked, barely louder than the wind. Shaking her head in response to the question, Trixie said, "It's not." A quick glance from the corner of her eye confirmed the owner of the voice, as Fluttershy settled down in the grass next to her. Trixie felt her heart leap, though she quickly returned her gaze to the patch of grass in front of her. A long silence followed. As Trixie tried to think of what to say, she found her mind wandering to small things she hadn't noticed before. The rustling of the wind through the leaves was the only sound Trixie had heard when she was alone, but now a gentle noise of the breeze playing through Fluttershy's feathers was added to it. It felt strangely soothing, just having Fluttershy nearby, even if they didn't speak. Trixie turned her head to catch a glimpse of Fluttershy, and found her staring off into the distance, apparently taking an interest in the dead tree. After a moment, Fluttershy noticed Trixie looking, and smiled at her quietly, then motioned to the tree. It wasn't clear to Trixie what was so interesting about a lifeless piece of wood, but just seeing Fluttershy smile did her a world of good. From the corner of her eye, she caught a sudden blur of motion, and turned just in time to see something fly into a hole just above one of the branches. Narrowing her eyes, Trixie stared at the hole, waiting to get a better look at whatever had just hidden itself. Suddenly, a white, heart-shaped face popped up from the hole. It briefly looked around before it flew off back into the forest. Once Trixie was watching for it, she noticed it happen again. Apparently the dead tree was a small hive of activity, but then why had she not heard it sooner? Now that Trixie thinks about it, she can't hear it now either. Perking her ears, Trixie could only see the birds coming and going, but eerily, they didn't make a single sound. Confused, Trixie turned to look at Fluttershy to ask for answers, only to find Fluttershy was already observing her with an amused smile. "They're barn owls, Trixie," she replied to the unspoken question. "They have small serrations on the edge of their flight feathers, and lovely soft down feathers, which breaks up the flow of the air, reducing the noise they make." But, Trixie thought owls only come out at night. Though it was not as if Trixie was entirely unfamiliar with owls, she often heard them hooting in the middle of the night when she was trying to sleep, but she never took the time to find out anything about them. Fluttershy nodded. "They are usually nocturnal, yes. Sometimes they hunt by day, but other birds may bully them into only using the night. If that doesn't happen though, like here, owls can enjoy the sun too. Though, it takes a while before they realize it's okay here." Fluttershy looked saddened for a moment, then turned away from Trixie to stare at the tree. "I guess you could say they are scared by how they've been treated, and it takes a bit of time for them to get used to something new. Even if it's something wonderful. If you try to wake it up in the morning it will just be scared and confused." Trixie felt a dull pain in her chest as she looked at Fluttershy, then slowly panned her gaze over to the tree. Another owl landed and scurried into one of the crevices. Trixie supposes that it's no use just telling an owl there's nothing to be scared of. The best thing to do is just let them go at their own pace. That's right. If they do try, and find out they are welcome during the day, some owls will adapt. But, it's also not really the same for every owl. Sometimes owls will just stay nocturnal, no matter how long they stay somewhere safe like here, and there's no way to tell in advance. She looked over at Trixie hesitantly. It's just something you have to be prepared for, either way, when dealing with owls. Meeting Fluttershy's gaze, Trixie stayed quiet for a moment, then she scooted a little closer to her so their shoulders met, but then stopped. "That's fine, it doesn't matter if they do or don't. Trixie thinks night owls are just wonderful too, even if they are harder to see." Fluttershy didn't reply, but Trixie could feel the Pegasus leaning into her just a little more, resting her head against her neck.